All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon and happy summer. This is Greg Bohr from the Office of Special Education Programs. We have a full agenda for you today. Our webinar will begin with a description of recent changes to the uniform guidance that will impact you. Kala Serpernot from our Office of General Counsel will walk us through the changes and what they mean for you. For the second part of today's presentation, OSEP will focus on the importance of collaborative partnerships between special education and vocational rehabilitation to support positive post-school outcomes for students with disabilities. This is part of OSER's initiative to improve post-secondary outcomes for students with disabilities. We call it Expect, Engage, and Empower Successful Transitions for All. OSEP's Janae Norbert and RSA's Tanya Steller will lead us through this presentation. Representatives from Iowa and Ohio will showcase their work and describe the collaborative activities between special ed and voc rehab that have improved the coordination and delivery of transition services and pre-employment transition services to secondary students with disabilities. Each state will also share how they created and are maintaining their collaborative work. The National Technical Assistance Center on Transition will also share tools and resources that can support states in their efforts to improve interagency collaboration and the delivery of transition services. So we've got quite a few speakers lined up, and I'm going to go directly to Kala to talk about the uniform guidance. Kala?
Thank you, Greg, and thanks for giving the Office of General Counsel an opportunity to provide our IDA grantees an update on the new uniform guidance provisions. Next slide, please. As you may know, on April 22nd, 2024, OMB published the updated uniform guidance provisions. The uniform guidance is the section of the 2 CFR Part 200 that applies to federal grant recipients and subrecipients, which are referred to by the Department of Education as grantees and subgrantees in our EDGAR regulations. These new provisions are generally effective on October 1, 2024, to federal agencies such as the U.S. Department of Education and our grant recipients, our state educational agencies and state lead agencies under both IDA Parts B and C, as well as subrecipients of those grants. These new provisions are effective, as I said, on October 1. However, given that the state formula grants under IDEA will be issued this coming Monday, July 1st, we have had conversations with the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, and we're permitted the flexibility that we would like to extend to our grant recipients, not just for IDA grantees, but all of our grant recipients. And we will be coming out with frequently asked questions that will clarify this flexibility. You will see new language, a few new paragraphs in the IDA Part B and Part C grant letters that we've drafted and that I have reviewed that makes clear that effective July 1, 2024, for the IDEA FFY 2024 grants, these new provisions in this OMB uniform guidance will be available to you as state grant recipients under IDEA. And they will also apply not just to the 2024 funds, but to carryover funds that you may have available from federal fiscal year 2022 and 2023 under TIDEX. This is really important because as I walk through some of the new provisions, you'll see that these new provisions provide greater flexibility to you in the grant space, particularly around when a grant recipient must seek prior approval. So I'll talk about those provisions next. Next slide, please. The big change is that prior approval is no longer required for participant support costs, which, if you recall, in the OMB definition, generally refers to training costs, conference attendance, and other related costs registration for non-state agency employees. So that's a really big change. In addition, the threshold for equipment has been raised in the definition in 200.1 from $5,000 to $10,000. So previously, grant recipients had to obtain prior approval from the federal awarding agency if equipment exceeded that $5,000 threshold. With the new regulation provisions, which we are providing states some flexibility on to take effect on July 1, that threshold is $10,000. However, our change alone may not be sufficient for you as a state to take advantage. Because the definition of equipment is has two parts to it. The first is it has to be either the lesser of the state capitalization level for financial statement reporting purposes or $10,000. So therefore, you need to check with your fiscal folks in your state agency to see if there is a state capitalization level policy. And if so, that will need to be revised before you can take advantage of this increased threshold and this earlier department flexibility of July 1. Next slide, please. There are other costs for which prior approval is still required, and some of those have not changed. All of the direct costs for which a state grant recipient must receive or must obtain prior approval are in 200.407. This includes equipment, and another area that is specific on IDEA is if IDEA funds will be used for construction or alteration of facilities. However, rent as a direct cost is no longer required to be for a state recipient to obtain prior approval. In addition, there are some budget amendments. They're not in the prior approval regulation in 200.407. They are in 200.308. And some of those provisions really haven't changed. For example, in Section 3 of the IDEA Part B and Part C applications, if the amount of a particular category of costs is going to be changed such that it's more than 10% of the overall budget that was submitted in Section 3, that still, as a budget amendment under 200.308, still requires prior approval from the federal awarding agency, and therefore you'll need to contact your OSEP state contact. In addition, another common area that we would see in IDEA is when a direct cost category was being moved away, funds were moved from the category of participant support costs to another category. That too requires a budget amendment approval to be filed. With that, those are the major grant-related changes. The department and OSEP and our Office of General Counsel are working very closely with OMB to provide additional technical assistance on changes that are made to the uniform guidance that will impact other areas, including monitoring and technical assistance. But in the meantime, these are the major changes to the grant application process and the prior approval process. And you will see this language in your grant letters. With that, I will turn the presentation over to Janae Norbert, who is going to get started with this wonderful agenda you have on post-secondary transition today. Janae?
Thank you, Kala. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Janae Norbert. I serve as the Secondary Transition Lead within MSEP. So thank you for joining us today. And as Greg noted, we do have a packed agenda, so I will dive right in. Today's national call, again, focuses on the topic of improving interagency collaboration and the delivery of transition services to improve post-school outcomes. And first, I would like to introduce and thank Tanya Steller, my colleague, who is a state team facilitator within RSA. Tanya and I will briefly discuss the importance of interagency collaboration and provide some tips on how education, special education, and VR specifically can collaborate. And then for the main event, We are exceptionally excited that two states, Iowa and Ohio, have an opportunity to showcase their work around interagency collaboration and the provision of transition services that have improved post-school outcomes in their states. So first up, we will have Iowa. And from Iowa, we will have Kelsey Teeter, who's a secondary special education program consultant within the Iowa Department of Education, and Mary Jackson, who serves as the Transition Services Program Manager within the Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services, followed by Amy Szymanski, who is the Secondary Transition and Workforce Development Consultant from Ohio Department of Education and Workforce within the Office of Exceptional Children, and Alex Carwin, who is the Program Director within the Lifespans Transition Center. And last but not least, we will have Catherine Fowler from NTACT, who will share TA resources available that are available on this topic area. And next slide, I'm sorry. And as Greg noted, this TA call is part of the Expect, Engage, Empower Successful Transitions for All initiative. We've had many webinars and have a plethora of resources that are available on our website. And please keep an eye out for upcoming events that will be taking place in the fall of this year. Next slide, please. And so one of the goals of the 3E initiative is to promote the seamless collaboration between special ed and VR in the delivery of secondary transition services, including pre-employment transition services for students with disabilities preparing to transition from school to adult life. Raising expectations, engaging families early, and empowering students with disabilities and their families by connecting them with VR, the VR agency, and other agencies that support transition are key, of course, to successful post-school outcomes for students with disabilities. Next slide, please. So, of course, we must point out that IDEA specifies that schools are to ensure that transition planning and services are coordinated with outside entities, agencies, and service providers as part of students' annual individualized education programs. But beyond the compliance aspect of inviting agencies to the table, we must consider the critical role that VR and other agencies and organizations such as One Stop Career Center, Centers for Independent Living, Department of Health and Human Services, colleges and universities, et cetera, play when it comes to improving post-school outcomes for students with disabilities. There must be meaningful, intentional partnerships and planning at the state and local level, and meaningful individualized planning at the IEP level that connects students with disabilities and their families with community businesses, organizations, and agencies that will be instrumental in their transition into adult life. On the next slide, my colleague from RSA, Tanya Seller, will provide some key examples that SEAs and LEAs and VR agencies can meaningfully engage. Tanya?
Thank you, Janae. So partnership and collaboration are key to raising the bar for students with disabilities. Through sharing knowledge, experience, ideas, and resources, state VR agencies and state and local educational agencies can significantly change the lives of students with disabilities as they transition from secondary to post-secondary education, training, and employment. So some opportunities for collaboration for our SEAs and LEAs include serving as appointed members of the State Rehabilitation Council. We call it the SRC, and it reviews, evaluates, and advises state VR agencies regarding performance and the delivery of their services, the achievement of employment outcomes by individuals with disabilities. SRCs are often described as the voice of the community to help ensure that stakeholders are heard as state VR agencies develop and implement policies and procedures that directly affect the individuals they serve. SEAs and LEAs can have representatives who also participate in your state VR agency's comprehensive statewide needs assessment. This typically occurs every 3 years to gain a better understanding of VR service needs in our communities, in your state, in your territories. So this input gained from those assessments help the VR agencies to inform their goals, their priorities, and their strategies that they put in their state plan. Particularly, we need your help to improve and expand VR services for students with disabilities and the coordination of those services to meet the needs of students transitioning from school to post-secondary life. SEAs and LEAs can also assist VR agencies in identifying personnel needs, joint training needs to serve students with disabilities. So with your input, we can also improve upon our comprehensive system of personnel development for the VR agencies. We also look forward to SEAs and LEAs both contributing to the State Educational Agency Agreement. This is something required under the Rehabilitation Act, where VR agencies partner with SEAs to leverage and access resources, to identify responsibilities, ensure the delivery of transition and pre-employment transition services, to share data and evidence-based practices, all to assist the same students we serve across the two systems. LEAs, as our local agencies, can also enter into similar agreements as the SEA agreement if they wish to do so. SEAs and LEAs can also strategize how to meaningfully engage VR agencies in not only the IEP meetings, but together jointly develop IPE, Individualized Plan for Employment, goals. So those are some opportunities for our SEAs and LEAs and for our VR agencies that are participating. Similarly, some of the opportunities for collaboration include proactively reaching out to our SEAs and LEAs to solicit their input on the VR state plan that we're required to do every 2 years through our Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. This helps to inform and develop our strategies and goals. VR agencies can also ensure that representatives of our educational agencies are members of our State Rehabilitation Council. We can also invite educational agencies to participate in the Comprehensive Statewide Needs Assessment. We can also collaborate to identify and implement trainings to meet personnel needs. And as I noted under the SEA and LEA collaboration, work together to develop the SEA agreement. And then finally, what we're going to hear more about today is coordinating the provision of pre-employment transition services, transition services, and VR services to better prepare our students and youth for their careers, their career pathways, and to achieve their goals.
Thank you so much, Tanya. That was an awesome tips for VR and SEA LEA collaboration that I know our states can definitely use. So the point is that it's critical that we acknowledge that secondary transition does not fall under special education in isolation at any level. Rather, it's a process that cannot succeed without effective collaboration with VR and other agencies that support students with disabilities. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go over all the benefits of collaboration. These are on the slide that you can definitely come to later. But we want to just stress that students, including those with the most significant disabilities and those potentially eligible for VR services, we want to make sure that they're presented with meaningful opportunities to prepare for transition from school to the VR program or other entities and agencies to maximize their independence in their community, self-sufficiency, and prepare for competitive integrated employment or whatever their goals are. And we at OSERS believe in modeling that at the federal level. For example, our collaboration with RSA. And then we also partner with our other federal agencies, within the Department of Ed, Career and Tech Ed, And then other agencies such as Centers for Independent Living and our other federal partners that support students who are transitioning from school to adult living. We also jointly fund the National TA Center, NTAC, with our RSA colleagues to develop resources that, again, Catherine Fowler will discuss at the end. So let's get to some real examples of what meaningful and intentional interagency collaboration looks like and the impact that it has had on positive post-school outcomes for students with disabilities. Let's turn it over to Iowa and then to Ohio. We may not have time to answer questions at the end, but please feel free to post them in the chat. So now I'm going to turn it over to our folks in Iowa. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Janae, for that wonderful introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. Excited to be here. My name is Kelsey Teeter. I'm the secondary special education from Iowa. I have to tell you, collaboration with our VR agency has been probably one of the most rewarding and exciting parts of the work that I do here in Iowa. So being able to showcase it here today with all of you is just like icing on the cake. To kick us off, though, I'm going to hand it over to my partner, Mary, to introduce herself and share a little bit about how the relationship got started.
Thanks, Kelsey. And I am Mary Jackson. Just like Kelsey indicated, and sorry, next slide, please. Just like Kelsey indicated, it really starts with a great foundation between the Department of Ed and Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services. And we've really grown from there. And so we kind of wanted to start off talking a little bit about how we established that relationship. For our state, having a strong memorandum of agreement between the Department of Ed and IVRS was really a good starting point for us. This really outlines and helps guide some of our local teams on determining which agency is going to take the lead for different services, which agency or entity might be taking the lead for funding for students for various services as well. As the MOA grew over the years, we actually incorporated in a data sharing agreement, which expanded our opportunity then to be able to cross-compare some data components to see how we're moving that needle forward for those successful outcomes for students with disabilities in Iowa. And every 2 years, we do an in-depth review and update our MOA and data sharing agreement. We do want to make sure that we are keeping that current because, as we all know, there's lots of changes that have occurred over the last few years and every year, right, in state government. We certainly see lots of changes occurring. So we want to make sure that that document is relevant and that it is user-friendly for people out in the field. Another strong component of establishing our relationship with the Department of Ed is we do have monthly team meetings where Kelsey and I actually get together and we have carved out time. So as we are having these discussions with our field staff and our LEA and AEA staff in the field to make sure if there are issues or gaps in service delivery that are occurring, we are having carved out time to address those and determine if there's any technical assistance that might be needed. So this also allows us to have timely responses and then to have collaborative problem solving and joint messaging going out in case maybe there's an area we could improve upon. This also builds trust and communication between the different entities and allows us time if we recognize that maybe there is a new collaborative resource that we could develop. We have time set aside every month to not only make that determination, but then time to actually develop that guide or resource to be able to push that out to our field staff to utilize going forward. Another big part, and I know this was mentioned earlier, is we have mutual representation then. So SEEP, or the Special Education Advisory Panel, I actually represent IVRS and participate on that. And it's a great way for me to stay up to date on the happenings of things that are emerging within the Department of Ed and across the state for individuals with disabilities. And likewise, we have Department of Ed, soon to be Kelsey actually, representing us on our State Rehabilitation Council, or our SRC. And this is very important for us because this allows us to get feedback from the DE on the various aspects on the changes in policy, procedures, or the happenings that are occurring within the IVRS system itself. And so with that, I'll pass it back over to Kelsey for the next slide.
Thanks, Marion. As Mary mentioned a moment had recently added that data sharing agreement to our MOA, which has actually came in really helpful. As an example, one way we use that data is part of our results-based accountability system. So IDEADA, or differentiated accountability, is that acronym there, is our Iowa system of accountability to provide support to districts when and where they need it the most. This really addresses our requirement for primary focus on results and providing technical assistance in our monitoring system. This is really a 3-year improvement cycle. And so really what we're doing in IDEADA for districts that are assigned to secondary transition is including that data that we share with Voc Rehab. So in the Voc, there is a potentially eligible status and there's an eligible status. And so the data that we receive from Voc Rehab regarding those statuses, we're able to disaggregate it to the district level and then cross-reference that data into districts B14, post-secondary outcome data, CTE, career technical education participation, work-based learning participation, and many of the practices and predictors that we know increase students' success when they leave us in high school. So this is really exciting that our districts and local teams now have this data available at their fingertips to be able to make informed, data-driven decisions around how to improve their post-secondary outcomes and what they can do and what they can change within their systems to better collaborate or partner with one another to move the needle forward. Additionally, our team in Iowa has recently reestablished our interagency collaborative team through the NTACT CBI. Huge shout out to Catherine, who you'll hear from here at the end. That opportunity consisted of two representatives from the Department of Ed, 2 representatives from Voc Rehab, and a representative from our PTIC, our Parent Training Information Center. And as a team, we engaged in 3 days of professional learning and strategic planning, where we were able to come together and identify how do we want to work together and move forward with a concerted effort in particular practice areas that'll help move our state forward. So you can see there we identified youth leadership and advocacy initiatives and family engagement as 2 of our focus areas moving forward. Along those same lines, here in the last year, Mary and I, and really our partners as well with the Blind VR Agency, as well as experts from Griffin Hammis Associates, have partnered together to develop a customized employment course for educators. Customized employment is a research-based practice for supporting individuals with the most complex support needs into competitive integrated employment. And really what we were targeting with that effort was developing educators' understanding of the customized employment process and its many benefits, and really developing the educators' ability to partner with VR in that process. So really, we piloted that this last spring, and it was really exciting to hear some of the feedback that we got from participants. For example, like one participant shared, man, this has really changed the way I think about post-secondary expectations for my kids, for my students. I can now see a pathway forward to them into competitive integrated employment where maybe I didn't know how that would be possible before. So really seeing the benefit from just having that shared system of language and approaches and strategies to, as was mentioned on a previous slide, create that seamless transition from high school to the world of post-secondary services. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Kelsey. So some additional collaborative efforts that we wanted to mention. So when I first started talking, I talked a lot about the state level efforts, but as we all know, this needs to go down to the local areas as well for collaboration. And so a tool that was developed is something called our local school plan. This is a plan where there's a local team that meets yearly at minimum. Some meet more frequently than that, but every year it is a tool that was developed to really outline the roles and responsibilities of the different entities that are involved on the local school planning team. So, for example, at a school district level, they would be explaining the different types of services and supports and programmings that they have available for students with disabilities. There would be a section for the VR to indicate the new and expanded VR services that they have to offer, as well as any type of contracted program or partners and businesses that might be a part of that local school plan that are participating in delivering transition services to students with disabilities within that district. And that tool is something that we developed jointly between the Department of Ed and Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services. It is reviewed annually as a team and submitted for review to take a look at how the different entities are collaborating. And we do use that as a way then for us to make a determination if there's any technical assistance that might be needed. So maybe there's an area where we're seeing gaps in service delivery. There could be an area where that collaboration is starting to break down a little bit, and how can we provide that system or that assistance to rebuild that relationship. IVRS does have staff assigned to every public and private accredited high school in Iowa. And so we are tasked with making sure we have a local school plan developed with each of those entities across the state. That's something that we have dedicated time to. That's something that we've done cross-training. We've developed collaborative resources to help local teams be able to implement the different items that we have outlined in not only the statewide MOA, but how to deliver services then locally. We also have initiated a survey in the spring that helps the team talk about how that process is going. Because we all know when something is new or you're implementing and you have different staff at the table, maybe we're missing various components. Maybe there's some other team members we should be inviting in, or pieces of the puzzle that we're missing. And this survey is an opportunity for that team to really take a look at that process and provide feedback on maybe ways that we could improve it in the future. This also is another tool that's utilized, like we mentioned, if there are gaps in service delivery, not only technical assistance, but are there programs that maybe we need to talk about developing jointly across the state to help improve those service outcomes. And it's something that we're constantly looking at. I know Kelsey and I just met recently for the upcoming year, and something we're looking at is we've gotten feedback through those surveys and through the process itself on maybe ways we could improve the actual tool in the implementation guide. That's something we're actually going to work on over the next year, because we want to make this as user-friendly as possible and make sure that the local teams are seeing value in those conversations that are happening across the state. The other collaborative effort that we wanted to mention is actually our Achieve system, and that is the IEP system that Iowa Department of Education utilizes. And we have developed a process jointly that there's actually a portal now that IVRS staff have access into. And so wanted to mention that because that's been a pretty vital part of our process in order to align our services with what is being provided through special education services in Iowa. That process, if a parent signs a consent form allowing us access in to be able to view that information, once that's in place, we can see the information being incorporated in so that we can provide that feedback. So again, we can align service delivery between the LEAs and then the IVRS services, whether it is pre-employment transition services, post-secondary services that might be offered. We want to make sure that both entities are collaborating, that we're working towards the same goal. And I think that's it for Iowa at this point.
Thank
All right.
you, Iowa. All right, Ohio, on to you.
Great. I was just going to jump right in. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy Szymanski, and I am with the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. I am the Secondary Transition and Workforce Development Consultant. I am thrilled to be here to share about one of the ways in which Ohio collaborates around the area of secondary transition. And this is going to be a specific focus that we have right now on the area of family engagement. We're particularly proud of this work because we have seen it working very, very well at the state, regional, and local levels, which I think Kelsey had mentioned we need to make sure we get it down to that local level so that we can see our families and our students with disabilities experiencing success overall. So a little overview of what this looks like in Ohio. First of all, again, a shout out to the NTACT Capacity Building Institute, where it all gets started. We do bring a team every year. We've been doing that consistently. I think this is like my 8th or 9th year attending. We have a cross-agency team that works together. We do have representation from a variety of different groups. We have the Department of Developmental Disabilities, Vocational Rehabilitation, our Statewide and Family Engagement Center, OCALI, where my partner Alex is, attends and works. And then also, oh golly, we have others that I'm drawing a blank on, but we have a lot of people that come. And then we take the work that we've done at NTACT back to Ohio, and we have coordinated what's called the Establishing Families as Partners learning experience statewide. And that work is also advised by a bigger, broader agency committee, the Ohio Secondary Transition Steering Committee. And that includes many more of our stakeholders, administrative level of a lot of the agencies that are on our cross-agency team, as well as universities. We have independent living centers, a variety of different groups that advise us on our work so that we have a really good integration across all the different stakeholders in the work. We use then our regional cross-agency teams to provide our training. And I think one of the really important things to emphasize here is that we have tried really hard to mirror the makeup of our cross-agency team at the state level, at the regional, and then at the local levels. So we really feel strongly that if we're able to do it at Ohio and at the state level, then we can also recreate that same level of collaboration at the regional and then the local level. So it's something that we've been really intentional about, making sure that everyone that is involved, from the coordination team, the training team, and then the attendees, are all cross-agency and then work together at the local level to form an action plan. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex just to give a little bit more about kind of how we operationalize this and some sustainability.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. I think we're really excited to kind of have all of that interagency collaboration at every single level, right? And our steering committee for this work around establishing families allows our state agency partners to have like leadership, so assistant deputy directors and deputy directors as part of that work in order to help prioritize it within their organization, as well as stay informed and help align it with other priorities. I think we saw a lot of focus on family engagement as well as cultural and linguistic diversity in some of our state agencies. And we were already kind of well positioned with this learning series to say, hey, we already have some of this content covered in establishing families. So you don't have to kind of dream up another training, or you don't have to find another partner. We can just continue to promote and align these new priorities and what the state agencies were trying to bring to their local professionals when we were already kind of positioned to do that. So having that steering committee and having those state agency leaders part of the conversation was kind of a huge gain for us in order to not only direct and lead our work, but also to make sure it continued to align with their state agency priorities. And then as Amy mentioned, our cross-agency trainers, they're from our Department of Education and Workforce, our Department of Developmental Disabilities, our VR, our Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, as well as OCALI, who is a statewide technical assistance provider in Ohio. So we have these regional trainers coming together, building that rapport and trust, aligning their outreach to, their local professionals in order to bring those local professionals together in their practice. So not only are they able to kind of deliver the training side by side, but then also recruit and market this opportunity to the folks that they're already connecting with, whether it's through technical assistance and training or through some of the corrective action plans and other items that bring people to the table for these learning series opportunities. And then at OCALI, we have several different projects with some of our state partners around collaboration with our MAP teams and our early transition planning. So being able to kind of align all of this work and to bring people into collaboration through multiple doors, and then see the value in continuing that collaboration kind of in another iteration. So whether it is starting as a MAP team and then taking this establishing families as learning Establishing Families as Partners in the Secondary Transition Process learning series, kind of allowing local professionals to kind of dictate where they prioritize like collaboration and system work or family engagement or student level planning, and being able to help them connect with the right resources, especially when we have our regional trainers already positioned to kind of bring them along in whatever path best fits kind of their need and capacity.
And I think, Alex, too, we have our Ohio Employment First Task Force, which consists of many of the agencies that are also on our cross-agency team, as well as our Transition Steering Committee. And we have been able to take the plan that we've developed through the NTACT Capacity Building Institute related to this Establishing Families as Partners work and drop it right in our Transition Vision Work Plan as part of our Employment First work. So the level of sustainability, is really built in when you can see that engagement from a variety of different sources, and we can see that work continuing, even if one of us, who are leaders right now at the state would leave, it's still in that Employment Task Force Transition Vision Work Plan. So I think whenever you can integrate it into other entities, other work that you're doing, the more likelihood you have that it's going to be sustainable. So we're really proud about being able to have that level of sustainability as well. And it's really also given us an opportunity to have more collaborative outcomes just across the state. I know I think about our regional system of support. We have training consultants that kind of do the professional development for our Department of Education and Workforce. And they work very closely now with a lot of our vocational rehabilitation counselors doing regional work that maybe would not have happened had we not had an opportunity for them to meet one another, to work together, and to provide this particular training. So I think it's really giving us an opportunity for more collaboration than what we're just seeing here with this work right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Our Employment First Task Force is made up of all of our state agency partners that participate and in even broader organizations, which allow us to even cast a wider net with some of our interagency collaboration and continue that sustainability of this work. And then I heard the Iowa team give a shout out to the NTACT team. I think just having the CBI and the ability to come together as a team and to have like 3 days together where we build our own capacity as well as work on our NTACT plan, as we call it, and which includes or is the focus of our Establishing Families as Partners learning series, just to have that time together and be able to brainstorm and kind of plan for an entire year of implementation or sustainability or additional collaborators. I think that really helps us as a state agency team kind of set the tone of collaboration. And then, as Amy pointed out, then it drops down to every level when we look at our regional trainers and it looks at our local professionals. So I do think NTACT does a phenomenal job with their CBI of kind of creating that expectation of collaboration for states to kind of follow.
Agreed. And of course, we could talk about this for days and days and days. We know there isn't time for that. So I think we can wrap up. And just thank everyone for the opportunity to share. We're happy to answer any questions. And I think Alex was dropping some things in the chat. So you've got an opportunity to look at our materials a little more closely. So I'll turn it, I think, over to Catherine.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. And thanks very much to Mary and Kelsey and Amy and Alex for being willing to share today. I feel like I know a bit about what's happening in your states, and then I always learn something new when I hear you talk about that. So really appreciate you all sharing and hearing those critical pieces around collaboration and alignment and the data sharing and carving out the time to make this a priority and the other partners that can be involved. So all the that good work is really exciting to hear about. And thanks for being willing to share. And I will say that I know that any of those folks are really happy to be contacted and asked more questions, and certainly can hopefully have a second to get to questions today. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time. Just a shameless plug for the NTACT website, where you can find some additional resources around, obviously, secondary transition. And then I will speak in a second about some specific resources. That's where our website is. If you're not familiar with that, like many, you do need to create an account in order to access some of the resources. And that's partly for us to be able to track some data about usage, but really it's also to your benefit in that there's, you can track trainings, the webinars that you participate in, and tag resources and pages. And so it's intended to be useful on the user end as well. It's also the way to request technical assistance from NTACT is through our website. And then related to today, some of the topics that you'll find there, that's how it's organized, is around 13 sort of buckets of topics. So data collection and use, specifically IDEA data is probably interesting for this particular group. Effective practices, I believe it was Kelsey mentioned the practices and predictors, so a lot of resources there around that. And then a section that's secondary education, where you'll find more guidance around transition planning and career and technical education, and students with disabilities participating in CTE. And on the next slide, I can just highlight, these are obviously, you're going to get these slides and can access them. So these are just links to a few things that would be relevant to today. Related to the data that was discussed a little bit by Iowa, we have some resources around that alignment between WIOA, so the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act data. So that's what RSA and the VR agencies need to pay attention to. You all on this call are quite familiar with the IDA data. And then the Perkins data, which is what guides career technical education. So we do have a crosswalk of those indicators that are relevant to secondary students and youth at the high school level. And then, of course, resources, again, for this audience around indicators B1, 2, 13, and 14 are on our site. Predictors were mentioned. We actually have a webinar coming up in a couple of months, barely a couple of months, in August, focused on some different resources around those research-based predictors of post-school success. And then you can just see, I won't read down the entire list to you, but these are just some things that would be relevant to what was discussed today. There is, Tanya at the beginning mentioned about the interagency agreement at both the state and local level. So we do have resources around that. And then I think it may have been shared in the chat, but we do link to, on this slide, that establishing families as partners, resources that Amy and Alex were just talking about. And then most recently, we've been supporting our youth engagement group, as well as the Rehabilitation Services Administration's funded parent center, or coordinating parent center, which is RAISE, their youth advisory group. And they, on their own, with a little bit of financial support from our two centers, have developed this Youth Engagement Now website, which is, again, reflective of collaboration, but it's also about how different state and local entities might engage with youth in a more meaningful way and have youth engaged in their work and sort of advising their work. So that's a newer thing from us that I wanted to be sure to give a little plug on this call. Again, it's not really from us, it's not NTACT's work, but it's from the youth that we've been supporting. So with that, I believe there's maybe one more slide on just how to reach us, and then I'm glad to turn it back over to, I believe, Janae, probably, to wrap us up.
Yes, thank you, Catherine, for
Thanks.
sharing those awesome resources. I think we do have maybe 3 minutes or 4 minutes for any questions that anyone may have for our folks in Iowa or Ohio. So I think we can probably open it up if it's okay. And again, if there are no questions, I'm sure they don't mind being contacted later. All right. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Mary Jackson, Amy Szymanski, Alex Corwin, Kelsey Teeter, Catherine Fowler, and of course, my colleague Tanya Steller, for dedicating your time this afternoon, your busy time. We are very grateful that you've taken so much of your time to pull together some examples and some tips that I'm sure our state colleagues will be able to take back with them. And thank you all for joining us and for all of the continued work you do in our states to improve outcomes for infants, toddlers, and children with disabilities and their families. And we look forward to seeing you all next month, I believe it is, or month after next, at the Leadership Conference. Greg, do you have any final words for us as we close out?
Well, Janae, you stole my thunder. I was going to encourage people to come to the leadership conference, but you've already done that. And yes, we all look forward to seeing all of you in person. This was a great presentation. I really enjoyed hearing about the work that's going on in Iowa and Ohio, work that really does matter, that really kind of pushes the needle. So thank you all. And we're going to let you go just a few minutes early here. So everyone take care.
Thank you again. Goodbye.
Take care.